So there's this famous quote about how art is meant to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable, and I've never cared much for the latter half of that quote. I've never really cared all that much about disturbing the comfortable. If someone's able to find true comfort, I say let them have it. And I've always cared about the first half of that quote, that art is meant to comfort the disturbed. And I think that the reason why is because I'm one of the disturbed. I'm someone who's found much comfort in art, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And one of my favorite genres, just as a whole, is horror. And people don't get that. People don't understand why I like horror. People don't understand why I write horror, why I read horror, why I play horror games or watch horror movies or whatever. People don't get it. People don't understand why people like horror, because it's like, why would you want to engage with something that's going to make you scared? Why would you spend your time with a piece of art that is intended to upset you or horrify you or shock you or something in that regard? But the thing is that more often than not, I don't find horror scary. I find it comforting. I find it comforting and peace-bringing, and I find it nice in a lot of ways. And so that confuses people even more, because they're like, why would you like horror in the first place? And how can you find comfort in it? How can you say that it feels like home to you? And so that's what this video is it's my attempt to respond to these questions, I guess, which I've gotten time and time again. You know, why do you like horror and why do you find it comforting? And that's what this video is about, I guess. Other people may have different reasons, but these are the reasons why I find comfort in horror. One of the most simple ways that I can explain why horror is comforting is to connect it back to something that most people already do, which is listen to sad music when they're sad. How many memes have you seen online about, you know, listening to sad songs that then make you even sadder or something of that nature? But really, I think that's something that a lot of us do, right? Is whenever you're sad, whenever you've gotten dumped or whenever you've gotten fired or whenever things aren't going your way in life, that's when you're like, okay, you know, let's break out the sad stuff. I don't really listen to folk music because why would I? But whenever I get all sad and reflective, I always put on that album For Emma Forever Ago by Bon Iver, I think is how you say it. Not Bon Iver, which is what I was saying for years. And apparently that's wrong according to Wikipedia, but who cares? But whenever you're sad, you don't want someone to tell you to be happy, right? It's like, just cheer up, bro. And it's like, wow, thanks. My sadness is gone now. And I think that's why listening to sad music can help you feel better whenever you're going through it, whatever it is. Because whenever you put on the sad record, whenever you listen to The Cure, you feel like you're not alone. And I think that's what it boils down to. I think you're able to recognize that you aren't the only person to experience heartbreak or deep melancholy or sadness or depression or any of these things. There's a certain comfort in knowing that other people have gone through what you're going through and they got through it, and so will you. So even though the music may be sad, I think there's a certain hope that comes with it. And whenever I'm sad, I don't want to listen to happy music. I don't want to listen to that one stupid Pharrell song. Is it just called Happy? That one that's like super annoying and in your face and not good. Whenever I'm depressed, the last thing I want to do is listen to happy music and listen to music that's upbeat and about how good life is, because in that moment, in those moments, whenever I'm sad or depressed or lonely or whatever, it doesn't feel like life is good. And I think that's really kind of the core principle, is that the art that you're consuming in these moments kind of, maybe not mirrors, but it is reflective of your inner state. Going back to the classic heartbreak example, if you have had your heart broken, then the music you're listening to might not always be about heartbreak. It might just be about being sad in general or whatever. And even though the lyrics may not match up exactly with what you're feeling, even though the experiences and the emotions of the singer might not line up perfectly with your own emotions and experiences, I think that, again, you can find comfort in it. Even though your experience and theirs don't match up perfectly, I still think that there's enough in common between the two that you are able to connect with their art. Meanwhile, if you're sad and listening to happy music, then the happy music just kind of reinforces that sadness. Because if you're sad and everyone else is happy, which is what it feels like whenever you're listening to happy music, then you're kind of screwed, aren't you? If you're the only one who's feeling bad and everyone else is having just a grand old time, then you're the problem, and that makes you feel worse. And so to sum it up, I think that sad music helps you when you're sad because it is reflective of your own personal experiences. It matches up more closely with your own personal experience than happy music does. And I think with horror, it's the exact same thing. I've never been chased by a serial killer that I know of. I've never been abducted by aliens that I know of. I've never seen a vampire, or I probably have. Some of the people I've known have been kind of weird. But in spite of that, at the core of every horror work is fear. And it can be a fear of anything. It can be a fear of life, just in general. It can be a fear of a specific monster, a specific curse or a creature or something of that nature. It can be a physical fear, or maybe the thing you fear isn't so literal. Maybe it's not a literal physical monster, but it is something more psychological. It's a deep-rooted trauma or something that you're struggling with of that nature. Or maybe it's not you that you're scared of. Maybe it's society at large or the world or whatever. Or you might be scared that life is meaningless and that the universe doesn't give a crap about you. And the thing is that these emotions aren't always fair. You know, you don't always have a reason to be scared of serial killers. I mean, you do. They could be anywhere. I mean, I'm a serial killer and you didn't even know that till I just told you, so. But I guess what I'm trying to say with that is that some fears are more warranted than others. But still, I don't really know that you can think a fear away. I think it's something that must be experienced, dealt with emotionally, because fear is an emotion. So you can't think about it rationally and logically. And I think it's just something that you have to kind of feel and work through. You can just feel your feelings, bro. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess. This blew my mind when I first heard it, but horror is one of the only genres that is kind of based around an emotion. It's based around an emotion and not like a setting or a time period. So for instance, if you write a Western, then it has to be set in the Old West. There are limits, there are constraints on it. There are things that are Western and things that are not Western. Or if you're writing a fantasy, then you know that you have to have creatures that are fantastical. Creatures that are unordinary. Or maybe not even creatures, but powers or lands or something of that nature. You have to have something that is not found in everyday life for it to be fantasy by definition. But horror is weird because it's based in fear. And yeah, you do have your tropes, you do have your creatures and your spooky castles, and you do have killing a lot of the time, you have violence, but you don't have to have any of those things for something to be labeled as horror. It is possible for works in the horror genre to have absolutely nothing in common whatsoever, except for the fact that they were both designed with fear in mind. So sad songs tell you that it's okay to be sad, horror tells you that it's okay to be scared. But I think that even though I haven't experienced any horror monsters or anything like that, I think that I still feel fear a lot. I still feel worried and scared and anxious and nervous and all those gross little feelings. And so whenever I engage with a work of horror, usually the reason it's comforting to me is because it tells me that I am not alone in my fears. You know, I'm a big H.P. Lovecraft fan, and I've never encountered any kind of elder gods. I've never encountered Cthulhu, right? Lovecraft's idea behind Cthulhu and the old ones and all those guys is just that the universe doesn't care about humans. That's essentially his idea. That's kind of his line of thinking. And so I think that's why his work is supposed to be scary. Is it actually scary? That's a topic for another video, honestly. But I think that's his thought process behind it, is that we live in a universe that doesn't care about us, basically. And whether or not you disagree or agree, that's not the point. Because regardless of your own personal beliefs on that, basically Lovecraft's line of thinking was that we live in a universe that does not care about us, and so in order to represent that, he created the old ones and Cthulhu and Azathoth and Natharlotup, and I'm struggling with these names, y'all. But that's why he created all these great ones and great beasts and whatever else, basically to represent this idea that there are forces in the universe that are bigger and greater than us that don't care about us. And that was really kind of the fear that he was trying to embody and trying to convey with his work. I do think that some of his work is comforting for me, because I'm a weirdo. But the reason it's comforting is not because I'm thinking about the universe, rather, but because I think that there are a lot of forces that kind of mess with your life in a way that you cannot control, and in a way that you really, again, you just can't control it. There's nothing you can do about it. For instance, the economy. The economy is one of those things that just, we hear about it all the time and we know that it's important and stuff, but I don't know if anyone fully understands it. And things like inflation play a huge role in everyone's life. Does anyone completely understand the stock market and why certain things go up and why certain things go down? Because quite frankly, fundamentals aren't 100% of the reason why things do what they do. In the stock market and inflation and the economy, all these things affect whether or not you can feed yourself. And that's kind of huge. That's kind of crazy. It's kind of insane that such a big thing can play such a pivotal role in your life. And again, it doesn't care about you. The economy doesn't care about you. The economy doesn't care about whether or not you can feed your family. And so even though what Lovecraft writes about, and even though what I feel are two different things, they're not the same thing at all. They do have some similarities. And so because of that, I can find comfort in his work. Another reason why I find a lot of horror comforting is because of the fact that I think that the best horror makes you walk away having learned something new about yourself. The best works of horror dive deep and show you things that you maybe didn't want to think about. I'm not talking about stuff that's intended to be gross solely to be gross, but rather I'm talking about works that might feature a character who is evil or bad or something of that nature. And even if you don't agree with their actions, you will be able to empathize with them by the end of the work. And the way that you come to empathize with them is by recognizing pieces of you within them, and so you've made that connection between you and someone bad. A classic example of this is James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2. I won't spoil the ending, but James is not the best person, but at the same time, he was in a hard situation. And so ultimately, I think the game plays out in such a manner that even if you don't agree with James's choices, I think that you should, by the end, be able to kind of see why he made those choices. And once you see that, once you understand why someone made a bad choice, then you start asking yourself the question, if I were in their shoes, would I have made the same choice? I think a lot of horror work is really great for what Carl Jung termed shadow work. So to give you a very simplified idea of what shadow work is, it's basically recognizing the bad, weak parts of yourself that you're not happy with and have repressed, and it is attempting to make peace with those things. It is attempting to make peace with any character traits that you have that you're ashamed of. And the idea is that as you do this, as you make peace with those parts of yourself, you become stronger because you have integrated parts of yourself that were hidden, parts of yourself that were weak, parts of yourself that you were disgusted by, and in accepting them, you are now stronger because of it. And I think it is through playing these horror games or watching these horror movies that you can do some of this shadow work, I guess, if you want to label it as such. And I don't think you have to, because at the end of the day, what I'm kind of talking about is empathizing with characters and making peace with their faults and recognizing their faults within you. Or maybe the opposite, your faults within them. And so whenever you engage with horror works like this that make you think and reflect on yourself, then I don't think that you will only find comfort through these characters, but rather you will end up doing some kind of internal work instead and hopefully becoming a better person. So I think that's comforting, right? You know, that's one way that you can find comfort through horror, is just knowing that you're learning, I guess. And one thing that I touched on just then that I need to talk about a little bit more is the difference between horror works, because some horror works are smarter than others. I think horror is one of those genres that can be as cerebral and as thoughtful as you want to make it, or it can be as dumb and as silly as you want to make it. So like I said, I don't think that all horror works are created equally. I'm most familiar with horror games and comics than anything else. I'm not a big moviegoer just in general, so that's why most of my examples are from games. But I think that Resident Evil is clearly a dumber series than Silent Hill. Now, I love my dumb child as much as I love my smart one, especially whenever my dumb one is putting out better games. And my intelligent child, I love them so much, but they haven't really done anything worthwhile since like 2004. So I think what I'm trying to say is I love my children equally. But this is such an interesting thing to me, that horror can be as dumb or as smart as you want it to be. I think that's part of the reason why I was asked so many of the questions that caused me to want to make this video, such as why do you like horror, or how can you find comfort in it, is because I think people are looking at the surface level horror. They're looking at the crap where it's like, oh, a monster, ah! They're not looking for anything deeper, and that's completely fair, because quite frankly, there's so much trash, there's so much garbage, guys. And guys, like, so much of it is surface level. Again, this is a video about why I like horror. I can't speak for anyone else, and so that's why it's not why people like horror. It's why I like horror. And so I get why people don't see horror as a smart genre, because quite frankly, most of the time it's not. Most of the time it is dumb. Most of the time it is just a guy with an axe going to kill someone. But even then, I think that things can be as dumb or as smart as you want them to be. You know, I'm thinking of that video that guy made that's a postmodern analysis of Sonic Adventure 2. But also, sometimes horror is just fun. Sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes it is fun to have a monster running around, or a guy in a cloak, a guy with fangs, a guy with a cape, a guy with a hat. But you don't always have to have substance for me to like something. Sometimes if you have enough style, then that's okay too. Style can be a lot of fun. And also I think that works that are more about, you know, violence or style or whatever else kind of mask the deeper, more thoughtful stuff. And it kind of keeps it hidden, and that's interesting to me. But yeah, there's something just kind of funny about that to me, about the idea that horror is wearing a mask of scariness, but if you take it off like a Scooby-Doo villain, then what you'll actually find is comfort. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone but me. But I think that if you like horror for some of the same reasons that I do, if you find it comforting, then I think that you can tell people that you like horror and they won't really get that. But I think there's something comforting about that in of itself. The idea that horror is something that isn't loved by everyone. It's not understood by everyone. I do think everyone has their limits, and I wanted to talk about this a bit. I love horror, but that doesn't mean I love everything within the genre. There's a lot of stuff that I just straight up find too disgusting or too unsavory to engage with whatsoever. And I'm not saying you can't like this stuff. I'm not saying that you shouldn't like this stuff. By the way, what's back here is not what I'm talking about, because I don't really want to call anything out. I don't really like that idea. I don't like the idea of calling someone's work out and calling it trash or saying that it's too extreme or anything like that. But yeah, I think everyone has their limits. I don't think that you need to push yourself to watch more and more screwed up stuff unless you want to. And I think that if you are like me, if you are looking for stuff in a genre that is defined by its horror, I think if you are a fan of a genre that is defined by how it's supposed to make you feel bad, then you shouldn't be surprised whenever you stumble across something that actually does make you feel bad. But at the same time, I think that there's still enough stuff that I love in order to keep me coming back. I've found comfort in horror a billion times, and so that's why like half the videos on this channel are about horror. So I think you can find comfort in horror because of any number of reasons. I think that I've found comfort in horror because it acts like a secret home for me. I think I've found comfort in horror because it can be reflective of my lived experience, or it can cause me to reflect on myself and think about the way I carry myself in the world. But sometimes horror is comforting because it's fun. That's all there is to it. So if you find horror comforting, I would love to know why, so feel free to drop a comment. Or if you still have questions about why someone might find horror comforting, then you're probably not alone. So, thank you for watching and have a nice night. Bye.